Hey everyone. When you get a diagnosis like bladder cancer, it's a lot to handle, right?
It really is.
And you're dealing with the treatment and all that. But then there's this other big question that pops up.
Yeah.
Life insurance? Like, is that even an option anymore?
It's a huge concern.
Huge. So today we're going to dive deep into that very question.
Love it.
We're going to be using some awesome insights from the folks over at Diversified Insurance Brokers.
They really know their stuff.
They do, and they've worked with so many people in similar situations.
It's amazing the work that they do.
The good news is, getting life insurance after a bladder cancer diagnosis, it is possible,
Absolutely.
especially if you're in remission.
That makes a huge difference. It's not a slam dunk, but it's definitely possible. And that's what we're going to unpack today.
So, when an insurance company looks at an application, especially from someone who's had a cancer diagnosis, what are some of the things that they're really zeroing in on?
Well, they're trying to get a full picture of your health, right? They want to know how risky it would be to insure you. So they look at a bunch of factors.
Okay, so walk me through some of those. Like, what's the first thing that pops into their mind?
Okay, the stage and grade of your cancer. That's huge. It tells them how aggressive it was, which helps them figure out the risk.
Well, how far it's spread and how abnormal the cells look, right?
Exactly. Then they want to know about your treatment history. Did you have surgery, chemo, radiation, or a combo? They need to know what you've been through.
So they're getting a timeline of the disease, basically.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, let's say I'm in remission. Does that change things?
Absolutely. Time since remission is a big deal. It basically boils down to this. The longer you've been cancer-free, the less risky you seem to the insurance company.
So 5 years cancer-free is better than 1 year.
Way better. For example, if you've been cancer-free for 5 years, you might even qualify for standard rates.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's a whole different ballgame. But of course, they also look at your overall health.
Right, so any other conditions I have, like diabetes or heart problems, that plays a role too, right?
Absolutely. They take everything into account.
So it sounds like every case is kind of unique, right?
Totally.
Depending on your situation, you might get a very different outcome. Can you give us some examples of what that might look like?
Sure. Imagine someone who had low-grade, non-invasive bladder cancer,
Okay.
and they've been in remission for, say, 5 years. That person, they might actually get offered the standard rates.
Wow, that's great news for them.
It is, but now let's flip the script. Someone's had recent or recurrent cancer,
Uh-oh.
or they have high-grade tumors, or are still getting treatment. In those cases, it's more likely they'll pay higher premiums.
Right. Makes sense. Higher risk, higher cost.
Exactly. Or they might need to look at different types of life insurance policies altogether.
Right. And this is where it gets a bit confusing, right?
It can be.
There are all these different types of life insurance out there,
There are, and it's hard to know where to even start.
especially when you're also dealing with a diagnosis like bladder cancer. It's overwhelming.
Totally overwhelming, but let's break it down a little. There are three main types: fully underwritten, simplified issue, and a guaranteed issue.
Okay, 3 paths to getting covered.
Think of it that way, yeah. Each one has its own pros and cons.
So if I'm in this situation, where do I even begin?
Well, what's your biggest priority? That's where you start.
Good point.
If you're aiming for the best possible rates, then fully underwritten is what you'd look at.
Okay, fully underwritten. What's the catch?
Well, it involves a medical exam, and you have to be completely upfront about your entire medical history.
Right, full transparency.
Full transparency. But if you qualify, it often has the lowest premiums,
Got it. But I can see how that medical exam part could be stressful for someone.
especially after going through treatment and everything. You're right.
So are there options where you don't need a medical exam?
Absolutely. Simplified issue is one. No exam needed.
That's a relief.
They will ask some health questions, though.
Right, so they're still assessing the risk.
Exactly. You might pay a little more in premiums, but it's a much smoother process. And then there's the guaranteed issue option.
Guaranteed issue, huh? That sounds promising.
It does, doesn't it? Automatic approval, no health questions, nothing.
So everyone just chooses that one then, right?
Well, not so fast. There are trade-offs.
There's always a catch.
Guaranteed issue usually comes with higher premiums.
Right.
And there's this thing called a graded death benefit.
Graded death benefit. That's one of those terms I hear but don't really understand.
Let me break it down. Imagine you get a guaranteed issue policy, and sadly, you pass away in the first 2 years. With a graded death benefit, your beneficiaries might not get the full payout right away.
So they don't get the full amount.
Not immediately. They might get a portion of it each year, and it gradually reaches the full amount over time.
It's like a waiting period for the full benefit.
You could say that, yeah. It's a way for insurance companies to manage their risk in those first couple of years.
Okay, so there's a lot to think about. It can get complicated really fast.
It definitely can.
Honestly, if I were in this situation trying to figure all this out on my own, I'd be totally lost.
I think most people would. That's why it's so helpful to have an expert in your corner.
Someone who can guide you through all this.
Exactly, like a really experienced insurance broker who specializes in these types of situations.
Right. They've seen it all. They know the ropes.
Exactly. They can do the research, compare different policies, and most importantly, they advocate for you.
Based on your specific health history.
Exactly. They know which companies are more lenient with certain conditions and all that.
It's like having a personal shopper for life insurance.
That's a great way to put it.
And that's exactly what the folks over at Diversified Insurance Brokers do.
They're fantastic.
They really are. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, definitely reach out to them. Or look for other brokers who specialize in pre-existing conditions. They can make a world of difference.
100%.
So before we wrap things up, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
It's this. Getting a bladder cancer diagnosis does not mean you can't get life insurance. There are options out there. It's about finding the right one for you.
Perfectly said. And don't forget, it wasn't that long ago that having a pre-existing condition like cancer made getting life insurance almost impossible. So as you continue learning about this, think about how much things have changed. How has the landscape of life insurance evolved to better support people like you? That's something worth reflecting on.
It is.
And that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.